And exercise 15-3 says Bowles County fund structure is as follows, and it outlines the different funds, right? We're familiar at this point with what all those funds are. Yes? No? Okay, so it has a general fund, 3 special revenue funds, 1 capital projects fund, 2 debt service funds, 3 internal service funds, and 5 enterprise funds. Then at the bottom it says, assume that special revenue fund number 1, the capital projects fund, the enterprise fund number 1, and enterprise number 4 are major funds. Okay? The requirements, letter A says, list the combining financial statements required in the Bowles County CAFR. How am I going to know how to answer that? Any ideas? I gave you some pointers. Page 605 in the email that I sent out. Right? So on page 605, again, it's the chart that we looked at, giving a general outline of the content of the CAFR report. In the middle of that chart, it says, funds reported. If it's a non-major governmental fund, you need these combining statements, a balance sheet and a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And on down the line, if it's a non-major enterprise fund, if it's an internal service fund, if it's a trust fund, if it's an agency fund. You see that in your book? That's how you answer this question. Okay? So, what you're given in the book is what the major funds are. All the other funds, right, except the general fund, which is always, what kind of, is it always major or minor? It's always major, right? So you take out all the major funds, you're left with the non-major funds. Then you go back to the chart on 605, apply that, and that tells you what combining statements you need to produce. Does that make sense? Okay? So, for the special revenue funds, the 2 that aren't major, the 2 debt service funds that aren't major, so those are all your governmental funds, right? So you have some non-major governmental funds. That means that for those non-major governmental funds, you have to produce combining statements, the balance sheet, and the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Does that make sense? That's on 605. Okay? You also have some non-major enterprise funds. Yes? How do I know that?
It tells you that 1 and 4 are major funds, and there's 5 of them, so the other 3 must not.
Okay. Tells you that 1 and 4 are major. The other ones must be non-major, right? You also have internal service funds, right? You have all 3 of them, right, are non-major. So you have to include those statements. Do you have any trust funds? No. No trust funds, right? Do you have any agency funds? Are you given any agency funds in exercise 15-3? No. So you don't have to, so on 605, you don't have to include the combining financial statements for trust funds or agency funds. But for the other 3 areas, non-major governmental, non-major enterprise, and internal service, you need to include combining statements, right? So those answers are there on that chart. Letter B, list the headings of the columns that should be included in the combining statement. There's a chart on the top of 609, which I pointed you to as well. What is it telling you? What does that chart say?
Telling you that the non-major funds need to go under other, and a lot of them.
Under other, what do you mean?
For a column heading.
Right, but in the combining financial statements, right? So they go under other in the basic financial statements. In the combining financial statements, they have their own headers, right? Do you see that? Does that make sense on that table? So, for the combining financial statements, you're basically isolating all the funds and giving them their own title for any non-major fund. Does that make sense? So, for instance, for the combining statement for non-major governmental funds, which we know we need to include, based on the table in 605, okay, the columns on that combining statement would be Special Revenue Fund number 2, Special Revenue Fund number 3, Debt Service Fund number 1, Debt Service Fund number 2, and then a total column. Okay? Do you see how we got there from on page 609? That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. As long as the headings are there, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yes, sir.
Where did you get all the listings for A? I don't understand.
Okay, so go to the chart on 605.
I'm there.
Okay? So in the middle where it says combining financial statements,
I see that.
okay? So where it says funds reported, it says non-major government funds. Okay?
That's not listed anywhere on the problem.
Right.
This one just didn't have enough information for me. I just couldn't get it.
Okay.
I mean,
Chris, the only time you have to produce combining financial statements are if you have non-major funds. Okay? So in the problem, when it's telling you that some of these are major funds, that means all the rest of them are non-major.
I get that.
Okay? So if you have non-major governmental funds, then for those funds you have to produce a combining statement balance sheet and a combining statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in
Can
fund.
you go back up to A?
Yeah. Okay, so that's these two.
So we're just basically assuming that, obviously, we know that, but at least since it doesn't say, we're just assuming that there are non-major.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Yeah, because those are the only two choices.
So that's for that first one on 630 where it says general fund. What is
630.
well on the problem?
General fund.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so is general fund a major fund or a non-major fund?
Major.
General fund is always a major fund. Okay, general fund is always major because it's including all of the general stuff, right? So it's always going to be the largest fund, most likely, and it's always going to be a major fund. It's always going to be a fund that you have to report on.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is why they gave us all this general fund, 3 special revenue, 1 capital projects. I don't understand it.
So they're giving you all the different funds that are covered in that government.
Okay.
Okay? And then in that sentence below, they say these of those funds, these funds are major funds.
Okay.
So all the other funds then are non-major funds. And so they're asking you what combining statements would you have to produce for those non-major funds?
So you don't actually have to write anything for the general fund, or?
No, because it's a major fund,
Okay.
right? Because in A it says list the combining financial statements, you wouldn't have any combining financial statements for the general fund.
Well, I guess what's confusing me is that you have, on 605 it doesn't say anything about a special revenue fund.
Okay, why? What kind of fund is a special revenue fund?
It's not on there.
It's a governmental fund, right?
Doesn't go on the financial statement.
So any of the, I'm sorry? Say that.
Never mind.
Any major governmental fund is a major fund in the financial statements, right? In this case, your special revenue fund is a governmental fund, but it's a non-major governmental fund. So basically what the problem is getting at is it's trying to get you to classify funds. Okay? So it's trying to get you to decide, are they governmental funds, are they enterprise funds, right? What kind of funds are they? And then are they major or non-major? And based on those, then you can answer the questions and say, okay, it's a non-major governmental fund, I have some of those, that means I'm going to have to produce a combining balance sheet for non-major governmental funds and a combining statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for non-major governmental funds. Okay? So, again, it's a classification problem. It's asking you to classify those funds. Okay?
Can I just ask where you get the numbers, like Enterprise Fund 2, 3, and 5?
I just made them up.
Okay.
Because there's no other. So, on page 609, when it shows the combining financial statements, see where it says NM for the non-major funds?
Yeah.
And it just numbers them, right? And it's consistent with the problem where it says special revenue fund number 1. So I'm just assuming that the other two, I'm just going to number them. In reality, in practice, they would probably have some kind of name. Special revenue fund for XYZ, right? But in this case, we're just giving them numbers, okay? And on the chart on 609, when it says, like it says SRF number 1, SRF N, N is for number, right? N is a fairly common notation for number. So however many special revenue funds you have, you just add numbers, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, it's not a total.
So essentially for this one, I don't see that there's any trust fund or agency fund.
Correct.
So you just need to list the first.
That's right.
Listed there.
You got it. You got it. Yeah, because there are no trust funds or agency funds, you don't need to include any of those combining financial statements. So, but all the other ones are listed, right? Okay. Any other questions on that one? Okay. Clear?